Hey guys, my name is Matthew. Today we're talking about the things that you should specifically not do when you're in England. Here it is. The big caveat to this video is that this list is kind of intended for people who are foreigners, not people who've grown up in England. So maybe if you've grown up in England, you think some of these things don't apply to you specifically. That's probably true. But if you're a foreigner, I highly recommend you don't do any of these things while you're visiting or living in England. It's pretty likely that if you're visiting England, especially if you're coming on a flight, that you'll fly into London. And one of the first things you'll run across are these escalators and these moving walkways. You'll see them all around in wherever country you've come from. But it's really important in London, and this mostly applies to just London, but make sure you stay on the right unless you're actively passing someone and then walk around them to the left. It's the opposite of traffic rules on the street, and it's a little obnoxious because there are no walking rules anywhere else in England, but specifically on escalators and specifically on moving walkways, make sure you stand on the right and walk and pass people on the left. The other thing to do if you are coming to England is don't only go to London. There's so much of England to see, so much history and heritage, and all around England is incredible. In the north and in the south, there are amazing places to visit. So don't just go to London and think you've seen all of England. A lot of people do that and they make that mistake and they miss out on the fullness of England. There's so much to see and do. Highly recommend you get around. As far as some social tips to be aware of in England, the first one is don't ever say anything negative about the NHS or the Queen. Those things are kind of protected status. And so this is one of those cases where if you're in England, if you're from England, and you know, it's kind of like when you have a younger brother or sister, you can make fun of them all day long. You can complain about the wait times and all that stuff. But as soon as someone else starts doing it, it's no good. You totally protect your brother or sister. And English people protect the NHS and the Queen. It's cool to make fun of them unless you are not from England, and then it's not cool anymore. So if you're visiting, unless you know people really, really well, don't even approach saying anything negative about those subjects. Another thing not to do in England is don't try your English accent out. There are something like 56 recognized accents in England, and so your generic Cockney-esque accent that you think sounds really good when you're back in the States or wherever you're from, it just doesn't fly here because there's so many different accents and so many different things. So unless, again, you know people really well, and unless you're really familiar, and unless they've kind of specifically asked, it's probably best to stay away from any of those accents that you think are just amazing English accents. Language in general is something that you shouldn't assume about. If you're from Canada or America or New Zealand or wherever and you speak English, you shouldn't just assume that English is the same everywhere you go. I've actually made a video about some of the differences in language between the United States and England, but just be aware that just because we speak the same language doesn't mean we speak the same language. If you want to see that video, the link is right here. While you're in England, you'll hear the phrase, "You all right?" a lot, like, "Are you all right?" And in America and maybe in other places as well, the question means, "Ooh, something looks like it's wrong. Do you need any help?" But in England, the phrase, "Are you all right?" is just a greeting. It's like, "Hey, how are you?" or "What's up?" or "Hello." And the correct response to "Are you all right?" is, "Are you all right?" Yeah, you just say it right back, or you say "good." Those are fine, but don't answer the question. They're not looking for your life story. Another thing not to do in England is to confuse England and the UK and Great Britain. They're not all the same place. England is in the UK and England is in Great Britain, but England is not UK and England is not Great Britain. And London is not England either. So just to be aware, mixing those things up and calling them all the same, it's a good way to get someone from Scotland or Ireland a little bit upset at you. It's just not all the same, so just be aware of that. Another way to get a bunch of English people upset at you is by doing what they call jumping queue, which is when you move in front of a line and pass it by or sneak into line kind of on the side. In America, we obviously don't like cutting lines either, but in England, it's a major offense. And so if everyone's lined up at an exit door and there's another exit door right next to it, don't just go around. People get pretty upset about that. Another thing you shouldn't do if you're in England is you should generally avoid talking about religion or politics unless you want people to kind of shun you. It's kind of something you might do in close friends or family, but in general, it's not something done in public at all. And so just be aware that talking religion or politics is a good way to get a lot of cold shoulders. Last thing I have, and this is kind of specifically directed at my American audience, but probably anyone just in general, is be really socially aware of what's going on around you. It's not that uncommon to see an American in a restaurant or a group of Americans and they're just the loudest table, and they don't really realize that they're the loudest table. And that's the stereotype of American. A lot of people are totally self-aware and they're not doing that at all. But if you're sitting in a pub, you're sitting in a restaurant, and you're the loudest people there, be aware of that and stop doing that. So this is our list of things not to do in England while you're visiting or living here as a foreigner. If you have any other things that you think we should also not do while we're in England, feel free to drop those in the comments below. We read every comment and we try to respond to as many as possible. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you guys next week for our next video.